In 2019, one of our goals as a family was to be more hospitable and have more people into our home. I don't feel like I am just an amazing hostess or that I have all these skills when it comes to hosting, but it's been a learning curve and it's been fun. You don't have to be a professional, you don't have to be this amazing cook. The goal is to just welcome people into your life, make them feel at home, make them feel loved. These are just some things that we have been learning and trying to implement in our lives this past year. Set realistic goals. So for us, we said we want to have people into our home once a month. If that happens twice a month, then great. But it doesn't have to be this once a week we're going to have somebody in. If you can do that, great, do it. But for your season of life, it may be more realistic to just say once a month or maybe twice a month if you have less on your calendar. Number one, getting the house ready. As a mom of 3 young children, one of my greatest concerns was my house. One thing that I learned from my mom is if you're striving for perfection before you can have people into your home, you just may end up never having people over because it's hard to get your house spotless and especially keep it that way with young kids. There were times when we were growing up that the entire house was clean before guests came over and we would take them on a little house tour, and there were other times where it was like, yeah, let's just throw it in the back room, shut the door, and call it good. We'll just entertain out here in the open spaces. We don't have to go in the bedrooms today. There's no obligation to give people a house tour every time they come over. I have to say, we've done a lot of both. Sometimes we clean the bedrooms, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have a lot of junk on the counters that ends up getting tossed in the back rooms. Generally, I try to use it as an incentive to go ahead and clean the whole house and get it presentable, but there's not that obligation, there's not that pressure. One big thing for me is the bathroom. So getting that presentable, wiping down the mirror, cleaning the toilet, those type of things. I feel like a clean bathroom does a lot. 2 things that I kind of learned by observation just from being invited to other people's homes was 1, a good smelling hand soap, 2, a good smelling candle burning in the bathroom or in any other part of the home really. Goes a long way to make the whole house feel clean and inviting. Works wonders. I'm sit next to Mama and play with something. Here's Teddy. Here's Teddy.
I'm gonna look at this video.
Okay, so that's number 1, just getting the house presentable. I actually remember in my teen years, my mom had another mom over who had a couple of younger kids, and we were sitting around the dining table eating, and she just said to me, "You know what I love about your mom?" And she pointed to a little bit of dust in the corner and said, "Look at that." I guess I didn't really think much of it at the time, but I understand it now because just the understanding that my mom wasn't striving for a state of perfection. We cleaned up the house before we would have guests over. We would dust and sweep and all of those things. But just because the house wasn't perfect, there wasn't this idea, oh, we can't have people over. In general, when you have people over, they aren't coming to see the house, they're coming to see you. And so I think that's important to remember. We don't have a very large house. Our whole house is about 1,000 square feet. And so our living, dining, kitchen area is all kind of connected in one long run. If we just have a couple of people over, our table seats 6, and so we can usually squeeze in 1 or 2 more and make it work at the dining table. If not, we'll do kids at the table and adults can sit in the living room. We're just pretty relaxed. Number 2, choosing the food. So we always try to text out in advance and ask 3 things. Do you have any food allergies, aversions, or preferences? It's just good to know, like, are there things that I need to work around? Can we not have gluten? Can we not have dairy as part of this meal? Or even if there are just preferences or aversions, like I know when I'm in my first trimester pregnant, there are certain things that I just do not care for. Obviously, I don't want the whole meal to have to work around that. But if somebody were to ask and I were just to say, hey, I'd rather not do chicken right now, then sometimes people like to know that. I like to know that. So from there, we start meal planning. My biggest piece of advice here is don't try something new whenever you're having people over. Don't make something that you've never made before. It seems like a no-brainer, and yet I know so many times I've been like, oh, I need a new recipe. I need something amazing. And so I'll look up something, and there have been a few times whenever I have branched out and done a new recipe for guests, and I'm tasting it for the first time as the guests are tasting it, and you're just nervous like, oh my goodness, is this good? Thankfully, We haven't had any horrible experiences yet, but I do feel a lot more at ease whenever I choose something that I've made before, that I'm comfortable making. Some of my favorite entertaining meals are literally crock pot meals. I know that sounds like cheating, but it's so amazing. I can put it on in the morning, it's done by 5:30 or 6 p.m., and I might have to make up a side or two to go with it, but I have a few staples, and I need to show this at some point. So yeah, that's my tip. Choose something you're comfortable making.
Or go one step further and make it easier on yourself by buying rotisserie chickens or getting takeout of pizza or something like that. It doesn't have to be something homemade.
Don't feel like you have to wow people. I want to make the atmosphere inviting and warm and cozy. I'm just not a fine china kind of person. I don't even have fine china. I mean, I have Corelle dishes. Chip and scratch resistant. So those are our dishes. If we have a big group over and I don't have the plates and bowls to accommodate that, we will often use paper products. It's not fancy, but it works. I don't transfer everything from the pots that I cook them in into fancy serving dishes. It just makes more dishes, in my opinion. We usually just serve our food buffet style. We'll put it all out on the kitchen counter. People can come through and take what they want and then sit at the table or in the living room. If we know we're having kids over, we usually will try to include a menu item that we know would be suited more towards young kids' palates. That's right. Oh, yeah. She says, don't forget the kids' food. Yeah.
What about the adults?
The adults?
The adults.
What about the adults?
The adults' food.
What about the adults' food?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. We don't always do dessert. We just don't. We're not that kind of people. We don't typically eat dessert every night anyway. I don't feel like that's an expectation that I have whenever I go to somebody's house. And, I don't know. Maybe we should start serving dessert. I don't know if people do this everywhere, but a lot of times in the South, whenever people will be invited to dinner, they'll say, hey, what can we bring? So in the past, I've just said, nothing at all, just come, we've got everything. But I'm trying to get better at letting people help, because if they want to be involved, I mean, sometimes people may just say that to be courteous, but a lot of times people really do want to do something to contribute or something to help out. And so a lot of times I'll say, hey, if you want to, you can bring dessert, or maybe grab a watermelon or grapes or strawberries, and we can do that for dessert. It doesn't always have to be something sugary. Or sometimes I'll say, you know, if we have water, but if you want something else to drink, you could bring that. So, yeah, again, I always tell people, no, you don't have to, but if you want to, then here are some things. So I feel like I really just have 2 or 3 staple meals that whenever we know we're having somebody over for dinner, those are my go-tos. And so I hope to expand that and have more and more over time, but so far we pretty much stick with those 2 to 3 meals. Typically we just have water. Every once in a while we'll do something like LaCroix or bubbly or something like that too. And since a lot of times kids are at the table, adults are sitting in the living room, we don't want to have open drinks in here quite as much. So we usually end up just doing water bottles. We'll have a Sharpie marker. People can write their name on their bottle so we don't get them confused. And we just give out a bottle of water to all the guests to keep things from getting spilled. And yes, we do recycle, but it's just super easy for me to give out bottles of water. That could change in the years to come. Maybe one day we'll get a bigger dining room, bigger dining table, and we won't do that anymore. So yeah, it's all right if you have to use paper plates. It's okay if you do water bottles. Tip number 3. Have some conversation pieces ready. I feel like if you've known the person for a long time, it's easy to get conversation rolling. You already know them, you have a relationship. If it's a new couple or individual or family, you don't already have that relationship so much. And so it's just great to have a few questions that you know you can ask to get the conversation rolling. You can ask questions about their history. You know, where did you grow up? Where do you work? What are some of your hobbies and interests? What do you like doing in your free time? If it's a couple, we love to ask, how did you meet and fall in love? For fellow Christians, we love to ask their testimony. How did you come to know the Lord? It's just really helpful to think in advance and have some of these questions in your back pocket that you can pull out to get conversations started. I feel like when kids are super young, they oftentimes will warm up to new friends quite quickly. They end up playing together, talking quite easily. But as kids get older, 10, 12, and teenagers, a lot of times there might be some awkwardness with that, not knowing what to say to a new person or how to start up a conversation. My parents would practice with us before dinner guests came over. They would have us all come to the living room and we would do a practice session for meeting a new person. We would put out our hand and say, "Hi, Mr. Jones, it's good to meet you. My name is Jessa." They would get us to think of a question maybe we could ask at dinner. For little kids, it might be like, "Hey, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?" For 10, 12-year-olds or teenagers, it might be helping them come up with questions to ask to the adults or to other kids around their age. And not just like yes or no questions like, do you like pickles? No. But like open-ended questions that kind of get the conversation going and rolling, and things that will take more than just one-word answers. Those are some of the things that my mom did with us growing up that were really helpful. We usually have people over around 6 or 6:30. I try to have the meal ready whenever they arrive, and we can all sit down and eat and then move to the living room and just talk. Another idea that I've heard from other moms is to bring toys out to the living room, so that way kids can play while adults keep an eye on them, and you don't have to be wondering, what are they getting into in the back room? We just happen to already have our toys out in the living room, and so that works well. If the weather's nice, we try to get the kids outside. Let them play in the backyard, let them run around. If it's rainy or muddy or cold, a lot of times kids end up being indoors, and so in that case, we might pull out coloring pages and crayons, or have a stack of games pulled out where the kids can pick through and find something fun to do indoors. What's up? A spoon to drink the juice from the pickle jar? You can just, I don't know if a spoon would work very well. Go get a spoon out of the drawer over there and try it with a spoon. If we're having over a family that has young kids, sometimes they can't stay quite as late. They may have to leave around 8 o'clock to get the kids to bed. But oftentimes we'll ask if they want to stay and play a board game or do something like that. We love to play like Ticket to Ride or Settlers of Catan. So those are some of our family favorites right now. What's this? Is this your giraffe? Yeah. If dinner guests can't come until later, say closer to 7, a lot of times we will end up feeding the kids earlier because our kids are used to eating more like 6 o'clock. It especially works well if our guests don't have kids. Then we may go ahead and feed our kids in advance. Then they can just play and all the adults can sit around the table. And sometimes that makes the logistics of seating and all of that easier. Having people into our homes is a great way to just get to know people, have a sense of community. Ivy agrees. Yeah. We've loved this. I don't feel like I'm naturally just good at this. So this past year of striving to do this monthly, even sometimes bi-monthly, has been super helpful for me. It's stretched me, it's grown me. It's just been good. And I feel like this is how we get to know people on a deeper level. And so if this is something that you're interested in getting better at, just branch out and do it. Your home doesn't need to be spotless. You don't have to be an amazing chef. A lot of it comes down to your heart in it. Just being friendly, smiling, being cheerful, being excited to see people, making people feel welcome in our homes. It doesn't need to be as complicated as we make it. I'm sure there are lots more experienced people out there who could give advice on this subject. This is just me, where I am in this season with 3 young kids. This is how we're making it work. I love you. I definitely don't feel like I have it all figured out. I feel like I'm still learning as I'm going along here. And if you have any tips or advice, things that are helpful for you whenever you're hosting, drop those in the comment section below because I love to hear about them.